Hi everybody, this is Kate Haley with Glazer's Camera here in Seattle, Washington. We are super excited to bring you a very special first look event on the brand new, just announced Canon Cinema EOS C70 camera. We have Peter Marr with us, who did a presentation earlier this week. And basically, I'm going to pass it over to him in just a moment. I just want to let you know, if you have questions about this new camera, please post those in the comments on Facebook or in the chat room on YouTube. And we'll do a little Q&A throughout this session. So let's not hold back anymore. Let's go right to Peter. Peter, tell us about this awesome new camera, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself first, just for those people who are just now meeting you.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Peter. I'm a pro market specialist with Canon USA in Southern California. So what I do is I deal with a lot of cinema clients. I go on set, I troubleshoot, I do trainings, I do trade shows all across the country from my office right now. So if you've ever seen any of those first look videos, a lot of times we'll do those. I've also been an independent producer and a shooter and a camera operator for the last 15 years or so in Southern California. I do a lot of little things. I'm going to be on a little shoot this weekend with the R5 and the R6, so I'm pretty excited about that. It's the first time I've been able to use those. But today, we're actually going to be talking about the C70. And this is the camera right here. This is one of my favorite cameras that we've come up with. This is a camera that is very small in size, but there's so much more to this camera. There's so much built into this. It's basically like having a large cinema camera in the palm of your hand. And I know we've made a lot of cameras before where, like the 1DC, the C100. These are a lot of cameras that, they would give you an amazing picture, an amazing image quality. In fact, I use the C100 all the time. I have a C200 that's capturing this frame right here. And this camera really appeals to me because I actually started off really shooting on the C100 Mark II and the 5D Mark III. So I've got a lot of DSLR integrated into my brain and my motor memory. So when I pick up this C70 camera, a lot of that comes back. It's very easy to operate. You can operate the entire camera with one hand. The way the menu works, you do have a lot of the same dials. You have a lot of extra stuff built into it. The real estate on the camera is fairly limited. So we have, for instance, smaller XLR ports, but the way it's set up, the way it moves, the way it works with you is very ergonomically friendly. It's very easy. Again, a big fan. We're going to take a dive into it. And first, I've got about 4 slides that I'm going to show you. I'm not really a slides kind of guy, but I think you would probably want to see a spec list. So right off the top, this is kind of the breakdown of the camera. The sensor inside is a DGO sensor, and this is the same sensor we have in the C300 Mark III. And when I say DGO sensor, it's basically a dual gain output sensor, and it works a little bit different than, say, a dual gain sensor. So what this camera can do is it can read that image coming onto that sensor 2 different ways at a time, basically. And you can get a saturation prioritizing gain along with a noise prioritizing gain. So you actually get over 16 stops of latitude with this camera. And where you're really going to notice it is in that shadow detail. Really clean, nice shadow detail, all inside this little camera here. And, we're also talking about the first RF mount on a cinema camera. This is a really, really big deal. This is the first time we've ever put an RF mount on a cinema camera. It's been something that has been talked about internally quite a bit. In fact, when the EOS R came out, one of the first things they mentioned was eventually we're going to have an R mount on a cinema camera. And here it is. And this is the perfect camera, the perfect size. It also has stabilization built into it. It's electronic stabilization. So when you attach an RF lens to it, it will give you extra stabilization. There's a communication that happens between the RF lenses and the camera body itself. And if you crop down into Super 16 mode, you actually get even more stabilization. There are higher frame rates. You can go up to 120 frames, up to 180 frames. The one thing I will say up front is our 16 plus stops of latitude goes up to 60 frames. So anything over 60 frames, you're going to go back down to 15 stops, which is kind of our traditional C300 Mark II, C200 in log, in raw light sort of gamma that you would get out of it. Some of the other things to say, this is the first camera that actually has onboard stereo microphones, so your scratch track's going to be in stereo. You also have the same menu setup. So if you've ever used a C200, if you've ever used a C300 Mark III or C500, you're going to roll right into this menu. If you grew up on a DSLR in a DSLR world, this is the perfect step up for you. The menus are going to be the same. You're going to get that same Canon color science that you have in all of our cinema cameras. And this with the Log 2, the Log 3, you also have PQ and HLG, which it's a little bit higher dynamic range. And there's a way to view it because a lot of monitors can't really put out that higher dynamic range signal. There are ways to view it so you can monitor your shadow detail, your highlight detail. There are a ton of new features on here. I really wanted to keep this slide for a little bit longer, but I think we should probably dive into the camera a little bit. So I'm gonna switch it back out to myself and we're gonna roll into the camera and boom, there we go. Okay, so camera body itself, very small, very light. It actually uses the same batteries that are a C200, C300 Mark II, C300 Mark II, Mark III, C500, all the same batteries that they use, all fit into here. It comes with a BPA 30. And this battery, to be honest with you, is gonna last way longer than you would be used to, way longer than you would expect. I've had a colleague test this battery for about 6 hours, and I haven't seen it printed anywhere, but I know this battery is going to give you a lot more life. There's also the articulating LCD screen, and I'm just going to punch in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. There you go. So it's an articulating LCD screen. You pull it open, you can turn this thing around. So if you want to do a selfie, you could. And behind that LCD screen is where you're going to find all of your audio inputs. Audio controls. We have phantom power that will go out the mini XLR jack. And once you close that up, you go off to the side, and I'm going to zoom in just a hair more for you. There you go. So right off to the side of the camera, you've got a full-size HDMI port. You've also got a remote terminal. So if you do have the RCB100, you can control this camera. So I've got an 18-80 Cine Servo that I can control remotely through that RCB100 with the zoom control, the focus control, the iris control. You can start and stop. You can put ND filters, push the ND filters into the camera if you want. It does have ND filters right there, which is truly a feat, to be honest with you, because the RF mount is 20mm flange depth as opposed to a larger flange depth on the EF mount. So we were thinking, it was like, how are we going to be able to do it? They did it. And to be honest with you, it's way faster. It's an incredible speed on these ND filters, on top of the fact that the camera starts up incredibly fast. If you're used to some of the other cameras that take 20, 30 seconds to get started, this thing starts up and it rolls off right away. So if you ever come into a situation where you really need that camera to perk up and start recording right away, this is the one for you. Off the back, your inputs for your audio, they are the mini XLRs. So there's 2 of those, and you always have the option to set up channel 2 to duplicate channel 1, and you can leave them linked as far as audio levels are separate, so you can have that safety audio track basically built into the file itself. Button number 4 is pretty interesting. If you can see, it's got that little red ring around it. That basically means button number 4 can be the waveform monitor, or you can make it a start-stop button. So just like a traditional cinema camera or any of our Cinema EOS line, you do have a start and stop up on the grip, and you have one on the side of the camera as well. You also have 13 pre-programmable or programmable buttons, and we'll walk through that a little bit too, but it's going to be the same flavor. You can basically just hold the menu button down, press any button with a number on it, and you can reassign whatever function goes to that button. So it's going to carry along a lot of the same traditional things that you're used to in a cinema camera, just in a little bit smaller size. One thing you'll also notice is the air intake on the side of the camera. So this camera does have a cooling system built into it, just like any of our Cinema EOS cameras. And off to the side, you're going to see basically the exhaust vent number 1, exhaust vent number 2. You've got plenty of 3/8 and 1/4 20s on the bottom. And you also have SD card slot right into the side there. So you have 2 SD card slots. And I will say these are going to record on a little bit slightly faster card slots, SD cards. We recommend a V90 SD card. So it's going to be a little bit different. If you have some older SD cards, I've tested it a little bit, and I have an SD card that's 300 megabits a second, seemed to work fairly well, but we do recommend that you do get the V90 cards. The other thing, which is a really big seller, this is something I honestly didn't expect on a camera this size, and that is your BNC timecode in and out. So just like any of our larger cinema cameras, you can run timecode, you can jam timecode into this camera, you can run timecode out of this camera. This is something that you wouldn't find on a C200 or a C100. You would only find it on a C300, Mark II, Mark III, C500, Mark II. Now you've got it built right into this camera. So if you are going to use this as a B camera, this is the perfect B camera for a C300 Mark III. You're looking at the same sensor. You're looking at basically the same ISO range. You're going to be a little bit more limited on your recording capability, obviously. You're not going to have internal raw light. You're also not going to have the expansion packs that the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II would give you. You basically don't have an EVF option for it. It's this, and that's about it. You do have the one HDMI output on it. There's a USB port, but that's just basically for data. You're not going to be able to charge it. The camera does come with a battery charger, and that, the DC port for that charger actually charges the camera itself too. Now, one thing I was going to show you is, if you notice this RF mount, standard RF mount, all right? Now, the one thing I will say is you're going to notice there's 4 screws on the side of this RF mount. Now, this camera will actually work with all of our EF glass. So we do have the EF adapters that you would get with the for, say, the EOS R or the R5 or the R6. And those adapters, which are basically, there's 3 different adapters. There's one with a customizable ring on it. There's a standard one like this one here. And you also have one that has a drop-in filter, which is pretty saucy. So you can put an ND filter, drop-in ND, or you can put a polarizer filter. This camera already has ND filters built into it. However, with that EF adapter, you're allowed to use any EF glass, whether it's, just a standard EF, any EF, or if you want to put a CNE on this camera, you can do that as well. And the focus guide still works because there's contact, there's communication between the EF lenses and the camera body itself. And like I said before, if you wanted to really set this up as a second camera, you can use the RCV100, and you can also use a Cine Servo with this. And this RCV100 will control this lens, it will control the camera. It's basically like having a C300 Mark III in a smaller body with a few noticeable differences, of course. Image-wise, it's going to look great. Let's see. The one thing I was going to show you too, I got a little off track, but that RF mount actually has a new, there we go. It actually has a new mount adapter. So on top of the 3 existing EF to EOS R mount adapters, we do have a new one. And this is going to be a little bit of a tricky name. It's mount adapter EF to EOS R 0.71 extender. So what this mount does is it's basically a speed booster. So you will get roughly 1 stop of light more out of that lens than you would have gotten before. So for instance, if I have this compact Cine Servo, which is an amazing lens, I can also stop it up 1 stop. So it's basically a T44. If I put that adapter on there, that mount adapter EF to EOS R 0.71, I will get an extra stop of light. One thing I will say is you're not going to get an added depth of field. All it's basically doing is acting like a magnifying glass, and you're getting that extra light in there that you would get, say, if you were a kid and you had that magnifying glass and transmits all that light into one point. That's kind of the basic idea of it. The other thing that I would say too is if you have a 50 millimeter that covers a full frame in 50 millimeters, through this mount adapter, it's going to translate to the same field of view that you would get on a full frame. So a 50 on a full frame will look like a 50 on this Super 35 sensor with that adapter. And there we go. So I know I've covered a lot kind of right away. I always love to stop for questions. I know we're about 15 minutes in. Are there any questions out there right now? We'll get into the menu a little bit, and if they're not, I'll just go right into that.
Not at this time, Peter. It looks like a pretty fantastic setup, though. So let's take a peek at those menus.
All right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this camera already. I haven't really been able to capture
It sounds
any
like
footage with it.
So you should sneak it into your R5, R6 shoot.
I know. Trust me. There's so much of me that wants to do that, except it's an MT sample and I can't. So it's like,
oh no.
I know.
Okay.
So let me, let's diverse a little bit here. So one thing I'll throw at you real quick is right off the top of this camera, you do have, there is basically the same iris control that you would have here. There's a start and stop, and then the lock for the camera is right up top. So if you want to lock off basically all of the buttons on the camera, you can select whether it's to lock them all or everything but the record on and off button. So if you do have to hand this off to somebody, they could, take care of it and not destroy the look you've already built into the camera. But we're gonna turn that off, and I'm gonna plug this in right away. There you go. So the really nice thing about it is you don't have to really get any different adapters if you're going to go HDMI out. Just plugs right in. That's one less thing that could possibly take off on you. We're going to play a little elevator music while I put this lens on here. All right. And menu time. So right off the top, you're going to notice a lot of similarities on this lens, on this camera. So we have a waveform monitor that can go on or off, and I'm going to go ahead and just I have a, did we lose? There we go. Sorry about that, y'all. I've got a finicky, someone didn't plug the HDMI cable in all the way. I don't know who that was, but I'm going to talk to him about it. Okay. So if I pull this off here, oh boy. So we're going to play a little more elevator music while I get this to work properly. I don't know what is going on with this guy here. My sincerest apologies. It was working all of a few minutes ago. There we go. So I have a DVD set up, and it's got multiple faces on it. So I just wanted to let you know that you still have all of that autofocus and face detection capability. So I can actually bump between these faces on this screen, and I can choose whichever face. So if you do have a situation where there are multiple faces in the shot, it will move over to the selected faces just by bumping that joystick to the left or to the right. And you can move that around, and no matter where that face goes, it will track those faces, and it's very accurate. It's very smooth, although my handheld operation isn't very smooth, which we're going to correct in a little bit. So that being said, all of that face detection is going to be found in this menu. So we're going to bump into the menu, and I'm going to bring myself back up here so you're not talking to a menu. And it works just like a file cabinet. So you have your tabs up top, what you need to see. You have all of your selections, all of your menu options down below, and you can just roll right through it like you normally would on a cinema camera. You just take that iris control and just bump it over, and you do have an extra function dial that will take you through tab by tab by tab by tab. Or you can go traditionally all the way across, and then you have the wheel on the back, which is the same wheel that you would be used to using for aperture control, say on a 5D or a 1DX. And you can just roll that up or down very, very smoothly. And if I wanted to go over and I wanted to change, say if I'm kind of the person who wants to leave my iris automatic, there are a few select RF lenses that will let you have automatic iris control, which is something a little bit new in the cinema line, because before, all of our cinema cameras would, you would have full manual control over everything. Now we know that productions are starting to gain a little steam. There's a lot less turnaround time. We know that you have to really pump out content. And this is where this camera is really going to come in, because now we have an auto iris mode. We do on certain lenses have an auto ISO mode and an auto iris, and that autofocus is going to be extremely fast and more reliable. So now if you have to hand the camera off to somebody who's not as experienced, or somebody who just needs to get the shot, or if you're in a situation and you've got a roll and you're worried about light, composition, audio, staging, whether you're going to get the shot, whether, that person's going to say what they need to say or not say, the situation's going to happen. You just have all of these extra tools built into the camera to help you get that shot that you need. So we're going to go back in. The other thing I was going to say too, if you want to get into the 8 and 10 stops of ND, this is where you would go into the menu and turn on the extended ND range. The other thing I would say is if you're used to working in shutter angle or shutter speed, if you're going to, for some reason, capture any old CRT TVs, you can set that up there. I always choose angle, ISO, or gain, depending on what school of capturing you came out of. And you can also change that ISO increment to a stop or a third stop. So another thing I was going to say too, AF mode. You do have 3 different AF modes. So it's just like all of our cinema cameras. You can set it up to one shot where it just lands focus and it stays there. We also have AF boosted manual focus. So if you're traditional and you love to make your own focus, but you want the camera to, kind of make sure you're tack sharp once you get there, that's what AF boosted MF is. And then continuous is going to be your always continuous autofocus, where it finds a face, it locks onto a subject, and it will just track it no matter where it goes. And one thing here too, you do have the speed and the response. And this is something that if you've never used this before, on our cinema cameras, we started to really pull this option in. So instead of just being a solid autofocus to one spot or the next, same speed from start to finish, we do have a little, it's almost like a slow takeoff and then a slow landing, or a fast takeoff and a fast landing. So if you are capturing a little more reality show based content and you need that focus to snap in and out, you can set it up really, really fast. Or if you want, you can really set it up slowly. So you can pull from one focus to another a lot more smoothly. This, when you start to slow it down a little bit, it feels a little more human. It doesn't like boom, boom, boom. It's not robotic. It feels like there's an actual little person inside this camera pulling focus for you. And we're going to go back in. Okay. So the other thing I was going to say, face detection and tracking. This is nothing new to any of our cinema cameras, but it's in here too. So you can turn that on or off. You saw it, how it worked. You saw that little box show up on the face. And then there's also face priority or face only. So if you ever get into that situation where you're in an interview and that person keeps, dodging in and out and dodging in and out, and if they dip out to tie their shoe, that focus doesn't go all the way to the wall. It stays basically where it is. And it's the same focus that I'm using on the C200 right now. And where are we at here? Boom, here we go. And okay, so we're gonna roll through this a little bit more, and we're just gonna go face only on that one. But here's something that's really, really interesting. So we do have all the same profiles. You got log 2, you got log 3, you do have PQ and HLG, and you have all of these user settings that you can pre-program. You can leave them buried in the camera. You can create them. You have 14 different looks that you can put in the camera. And you also have the option to change that. So if I want to edit this and I want to change, whether I want it to be different gamma and gamut profiles, I can set that up there. If I just want, say 709, 709, and I want to change my color matrix. You also have a look file you can build and use in this camera, which will bake it into that image. One thing to keep in mind is if you use this look file with a viewing LUT, you will double LUT it. It'll get a little bit muddy. Just be very aware when you start playing into some of this color. You also have all of these adjustments that you can make in here too. So, you know, if you want to change color, balance, you want to change the gamma, the pedestal, all of that stuff, you can change all of that out. And we're going to go right back out of there. And again, you can save it and you can load it to an SD card. You can share it to different cameras. You can put it back in. If you know you're going to a situation more than once, you can save that look right in there and you can come back to that situation and just everything will be set up right where you left it off. And this is where we always say initialize. That basically means format. Oops, sorry. And this is where you can change whether it's Super 35 or Super 16. And once you go into there, you start looking at all of these different codecs. You have XFAVC, you have HEVC, and you have H.264. So when we start talking about these codecs, this is where you're going to look at a ton of different options. And these options are basically going to be more than I'm willing to tell you right now. But if you take a look at this, this is essentially most all of your recording formats. I have another slide that I'm going to show you in a second too. The biggest difference between this and say a C300 Mark III, they have the same sensor. Obviously there's physical differences. You have add-ons for the 300 and the 500. With this one, you're a little bit limited, yet you're a little bit more extended as far as ranges go in your recording options. So with this, you don't get that 810 megabit beefy XFAVC file that you would get on the 300 Mark III. It is the smaller file. You do have other options too, where you have all of these, and then you also have all of these recording formats too. So when we really break this camera down, you're looking at a ton of different options, a lot of different things that you can do in this camera, what this camera does right off the top, off of that Super 35 sensor. And I'm gonna roll down real quick to make sure I'm not losing anything on you. All right. Okay, here we go. My apologies there. So one thing I will throw out there is you do get a slow and fast motion off of this camera. So you do have, you know, up to 120 frames. And then there's also an option in the camera too. So you can record 120 frames, but you also get an audio file with it. So that audio file, I believe, records to the second card. I don't know if you have to have two cards in there or not. Haven't tried it myself. Just got this thing yesterday. Had it for a day before and that was it. But you do get that audio file. So now you do have more options. It's not just, you know, no audio on your slow and fast motion, but you do have that extra audio on there. And you do have a lot of different options when you start recording to different cards. So you have kind of a proxy file setup you can make. You can record two different formats to two different cards. You have a lot of different options built into this camera. And since I'm at that point where I could talk about recording options before going back into the menu, are there any questions at all so far?
No, we're good. I mean, I think people are watching. Okay. You're just, you know, you just have them entranced, and I mean, you're sharing a lot of really great information. So
I think you're nailing it, is what you're saying.
You're nailing it. Absolutely.
Just wanted to make sure.
Always. Was there ever any doubt? I mean, come on.
I mean, you know, I guess it could be, but maybe not.
Well, I have to say I can appreciate, you know, like your commentary when you were having technical issues, because I mean, that's like a real life scenario. We have technical issues, whether we shoot still or shoot video. You got to roll with it. You got to figure it out. You got to be calm. You got to troubleshoot it. So, and the elevator music was really fab. So thanks for sharing that. And that Devin is super appreciative. Yeah. Well, there's, yeah. Well, you
hopefully
did
it won't happen more than 3 times. So.
Then you have to start recycling the elevator music.
Yeah, we don't want that at all. No way.
No, we don't. Definitely not. All right, let's keep rolling. We have about so we scheduled this, I think, until 1. So we have time left. If we wrap a little early, then we wrap a little bit early. So that totally happens sometimes too. So
sometimes that happens too. You know,
it does.
Then everybody gets the rest of the day off. Tell them I said so.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you also have the slow and fast, and you also still have the pre-recording built into here too, which is kind of cool. So if anything amazing happens in front of the lens, you still have about 3 seconds to go back, hit the record button, and then it will capture whatever it was that happened in there. We're gonna go back to normal, and this is where you have all of these options. And what's really cool is I'm showing you kind of the long way to get to all of these. In a minute, I'm gonna turn the camera around and I'm gonna show you the easiest, fastest. One of the best things about this camera is the touch control. So, I'll walk you through the menu a little bit more and then we'll really get into that. We're gonna go through. This is something I will admit, and this is something that has carried over from the C200, C300 Mark III. It's just the LCD screen. Once you get this camera right out of the box, it comes off normal luminance. One thing I will say, bump this up to 2 once you get it, because that way the LCD screen's a little bit brighter, a little more high contrast. You're able to see it a little easier in the daytime. You also have this option where you can, do your D-squeeze on the anamorphic, and excuse me here. And you also have a lot of these OSDs. So if I wanted to turn all of the OSDs off, I could turn them off, or I can turn them all back on. And you also have this opacity level, which is really, really cool. So right now, if I roll into this, and I'm going to menu out just to make sure that I'm getting a horrible image off of here for you. And I'm going to focus in on that. So there's Vince again. Oh, Vince, you lovely fellow, you. So I can change this opacity from the HDMI to off to on, and I can change that opacity, and I'm going to scroll down to make sure I'm not talking like a moron and you can't see anything. So I can change that opacity to be brighter and brighter. And what's really cool is this is something that just started showing up in the cinema cameras on the last model or two. So now you can actually roll through the menus and you can actually see what's going on behind. So depending on what your taste is, what your flavor is, you can actually set that opacity on all of these. And that also works for the touchscreen control, which I've already talked about a little bit earlier. Why not talk about it right here? And this is gonna take a little finagling. So we're gonna get back to this, and I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to make a quick little adjustment here so I can actually change your, let me see here, switch your palettes. We're going to go to this, and I'm going to change to camera 2 so I can give you a little bit cleaner picture-in-picture off of this. I'm sorry, I'm my own producer today, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit on that one there. So now if I go back into this, let me show you a little bit closer there. I'm going to try to keep this as straight as I can so you have an idea of what I'm doing. So right now, this screen is basically what you see in the top corner of that picture-in-picture look. So if you look on the bottom left, you see there's like a touch icon with a screen. And if I touch that icon, you're actually seeing all of this stuff show up on the bottom. So I actually have a white balance, I have ND, stop, ISO, shutter. If I touch any of these, I can actually change my white balance without having to go in the menu, without having to hit the function key. All I have to do is press that. If I want to start bumping ND filters on or off, I can literally, let's see if I can get a decent background in here. You're looking at my table right now. So now, these ND filters drop in incredibly fast. They make life a whole lot easier with that ND filter and the speed of it, because normally on some of our other cameras, it actually comes off a little bit slower. And you also have a one-stop place to hit your f-stop. So just like some of our DSLRs, just like our XF, say 405, you can just slide that iris control left and right. And you also have the same iris control here. So I can roll that iris control back and forth manually, or I can go to the screen. And what you see here is our ISO selection. So I can slide this back and forth, but I also have these presets built up top. So if I want to go straight to 200 ISO, I can just go straight to 200. Oops, sorry. I can go straight to 400, 200, 800, or if I want to register it, I can actually create these little tabs, these custom tabs that I can throw right in there. So go down to your shutter angle, and then you also have all of your assist functions built right in. So if I want to turn the peaking on, if I want to turn that waveform on or off, if I want to change that waveform to a vector scope, I can just press that, literally 2 taps, 3 taps on the screen, and you've got all of your assist functions right there. False color on or off. You're not going to see it, but you see it on the screen, how everything turned purple. That basically means there's no exposure at all going on. And if I turn that on again, I'm going to open this back up so you can kind of see, I don't know if you can see that up in there. You got a lot of different colors going on. You got some greens up on the side. Let me just throw that over there. Probably not. If I was a smarter man, I would go ahead and put it through the HDMI out right now, but I think you all get the gist of what I'm talking about here. And we can return back out, and if I go back up to the top, there's this little marker right up here on the top corner. What this does is this sets up 3 different pages of options that I don't have to go into the menu for. So if I want to change what my crop factor is, I can crop right into Super 16 from here. I can return back out of that. If I want to change different recording formats to different cards, I can change that. If I want to turn the the relay or double slot on. If I want to change all of these from main to proxy, normal, super, let me go back out here. If I want to change my recording format, I can change my recording format based on what my settings are. And if I want to change the look, I have all these different options just with a few taps of the screen on the back. So this camera is really, really built for fast capture, run and gun. It's built for getting the shot when you need the shot. It's built for ease of use. This is really going to make life a little bit easier for a lot of people. So as far as the bit rate, the sub record, if I had a card in here, it would be a lot different menu, but you get where I'm going with this as far as you have all of these different options. You have easy access to all these options that would normally take a few menu hits, or you'd have to go in and assign a button for it. This just makes life a whole lot easier with this touch this touch control screen on the back. Let me see if I'm just missing anything brilliant that I haven't told you yet. You're looking at these look files, the autofocus. The autofocus is going to be the ITR autofocus, so it's going to work just like the 1DX Mark III. So this autofocus with that face detection can detect heads and faces. So if I turn around, it's going to lock on the head still. If you put glasses on, if you put a helmet on, it was dubbed deep learning when the 1DX Mark III came out, but it basically is just a slew of images built into the memory of that camera. So it knows that a head is connected to the shoulders, to follow, to track. The camera is probably way smarter than any other camera we've had before. And one thing I'll tell you is the auto ISO. I think we talked about that. And I'm going to roll back into the menu to show a couple of different things. And let's see, I'm going to roll back here. Apologies, I'm working 3 different things right now. And we'll just go back into that. So once you go into this, we're going to go focus guide on or off. Boom. Go back into here, extended ND range. And one of the things I was going to say too is the stabilization. We do have the advanced stabilization. I know I kind of mentioned it before. You do have the electronic stabilization built in. You do have the auto ISO, which is a menu selection. You do have the RCB 100 remote, which is a menu selection. And then one last thing I was going to throw out there too is, gosh, I only have one screen. Normally I have 2 screens on here. Is if we go into this, you actually have a 1/4-20 built into the side of the camera. So right now, if I wanted to go into vertical shooting for all of my wonderful favorite Instagram videos that I do, I can just set the camera up vertically, change a selection in the menu, and I can tell this camera that this camera is either going to be 90 degrees or 270 degrees, and it will basically change all of my menus to be vertical one way or the other, whether it's hanging or whether it's on top of a tripod. So for anybody who's capturing the advertising, or it's vertical advertising, or, I hate to say it, there's so much content out there right now that's shot vertically, and this camera will make it a lot easier to get there and get that done. To be honest with you, I think I'm pretty much, we talked about time code, remote. Yeah, that's it's basically all I really have. I know we've got about 15, 20 minutes left, but I do think I covered mostly what this camera is going to be all about, aside from this handle. And this handle fits on top of the camera, just like so.
Oh,
this
so
is
that
the
helps you
icing on the
with
cake, y'all. This is
stabilization, mounting a mic.
Oh man,
Yeah.
does it take a mic? Let me tell you, this thing. You put a mic right on top of there. It's actually got the standard Canon, sandwich grip for it.
Okay.
I just
Sandwich
want to
is
save the best
lunchtime.
part for last.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can say that we're still pretty lean on the question front here. However, it's also okay if we wrap this up a little bit early. You've done a very thorough job at this first peek. So if you have a couple of closing, yes, it was Devin. Devin's very loud sometimes. So Devin, the man behind the scenes who's making all of this technological stuff happen, he pushes all the buttons, and sometimes, never mind. Anyhow.
Well, I have to say, if he wasn't there, you would have to do what I do and just look down like this and do this.
Oh,
all
I'm
day.
totally still kind of doing that because I have this TV over here that's like really big, but it's like way up here, but I'm down here. And I'm like, I need a monitor that's like right here. But anyhow, we'll get there. So yeah, no, I think that we've done, like you have done, we haven't done anything. I'm just listening to you marvel about this new camera. And learning things about it, and a lot, of course, that I don't know because I'm primarily a still photographer. So it's nice to pick up things along the way during these sessions too. So do you have a couple of closing comments? And then I'd say we can go ahead and wrap this up for now.
Okay. Yeah. The one thing I will say, this is probably, and I am kind of gushing over this camera. I really am. At first when I saw it, it was like, okay, let me see what you got. But as I really dive through it, it's won me over. This is extremely versatile, and it does really reach into those realms of where a camera this size wouldn't have reached before. So I was able to take this last night, just set up the RCV 100 on the 18-80, and I was able to control the whole thing. ND filters dropping in and out, and that's a really big deal, especially if you are on a multi-camera shoot, or if you're going to do live events. You really have an extra camera body that's a lot lighter. The battery lasts a lot longer, and you can, leave this in a situation where it's going to just work for you. It's one of those cameras that you can trust. So again, same Canon color science. You've got us at Canon, our services, award-winning service. We're always there to answer questions and help out in any way. Again, big fan of this camera. I can't wait to see it get there. And I think, for a lot of the clientele out there, especially for a lot of the productions that are live events or fast turnarounds, this is really going to be a winner for you. So
let me ask just a couple of quick questions. What's the price point on this miniature beast of a camera? Do we have a price point on it?
I want to say it's
ballpark is fine.
Right around. I want to say it's right around $54.99.
Wow.
That would probably be a question that I'll get a text in about a second, maybe, if I'm right or wrong on that. But
and then, but it's available for.
Just leave it out there, right around there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting confirmation on our end about that too.
Correct.
Yeah, see, I knew.
Awesome.
I knew what I was talking about there.
And then people could pre-order that today.
Yep, so $54.99 is going to be the price tag on it.
So if you're watching this right now and you're sold on this camera like he is, you could pre-order it. Like you could give the store a call and put your name down for one when they're available.
Did we lose you, Kate?
Did they lose me, Devin?
No.
Can you
lose Peter?
Can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Oh, they can hear me. Hang on. Thank you, Peter.
I can hear you.
Well, while Kate's working out that audio issue, I could talk about the audio on this C70 right now as well.
I'm on.
Kate, are you back?
Can you hear me now? Hang on.
4 channels of audio on the C70.
Why did it mute?
Am I on now?
Well,
There you are. All right.
you.
You missed so
Okay,
much. I said 4
I know,
channels of audio. It was
I
amazing.
know, I heard you. I heard you.
Oh, okay.
I lost my audio. Okay. What I was saying before I was muted is, so 5,500-ish. For those of you tuning in, if you wanted to pre-order it, you could call the store and get your name down for one of these. When are they anticipated to be available for, like, to put it in your own hands? Do we have a potential date?
Yeah, I believe, Stephanie?
Stephanie's
I think
another
it's going to be
person behind the
November,
scenes.
December, right around there, I think before the end of the year.
Oh.
Yes, that is correct.
All
Okay.
right, we got the
All right.
confirmation on it.
So I do have a question from the audience tuning in. Does the C70 have an SDI connection? How would someone connect this camera to an SDI system?
So the SDI connection does not exist in this camera other than time code. However, there are third-party adapters that you can transfer the HDMI to SDI if you needed to.
Okay.
Yeah, I have one. It's a little box. A lot of times they'll take their own power. But yeah, that's one of the separators between this camera and, like say the 300 Mark III or the 500 is the
Gotcha.
only output on it is the full HDMI A out.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you for asking that question, Sebastian, and tuning in. Do you have, like I said before, do you have any last thoughts or closing remarks other than that you're personally very excited about this camera and ready to put it through its paces?
The last remark I would say is you're going to be extremely happy with the RF glass and the speed and the autofocus and everything. It's just, it takes it to another level. That being said, with the R5 and the R6, that glass is a little bit harder to find right now. The adapters are a little bit harder to find. So if you do pre-order this camera, or if you do get this camera, you may want to abscond some glass as soon as you can, some RF glass.
Right.
However,
Right.
the EF to EOS R adapter works with all of our EF lenses too, whether it's a CNE, whether it's a Cine Servo EF glass.
Right. Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Peter, I want to thank you so much for that very in-depth and passionate look at the new C70. It's just, I appreciate, because with your hands-on experience in the industry, as well as your knowledge of the Canon system, you're like the perfect person to do a little chat like this. So we're appreciative. For those of you tuning in, if you are interested and curious about this camera, it sounds like they'll be in stores later in the year. If you're ready to buy one, or at least get your name on that list so you could be one of the first people to own one, give the store a call, Glazer's Camera, and we can get your name down for a pre-order. So Peter and Stephanie hanging out in the background there. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and passion about cinema and all this amazing gear. And I want to have a great weekend. And for those of you tuning in, don't leave yet. I have a couple of announcements. Tomorrow we have 2 more Canon-centric live sessions. One is with Canon Explorer of Light, Roberto Valenzuela. And we're going to talk about shooting on location with him. And then at 12 p.m., we have a special Zoom session with Tyler Beck, and we're going to talk about kind of like the intro to video. So if you're more curious about more video techniques, or maybe you're looking to get started with video, you'll definitely want to sign up for those sessions. Get a notification when we are about to go live. And also, there are some special super secret promotions happening this week that only can go out to people who sign up for our events. So be sure that you've signed up, and we will send that out. Someone's asking if we'll do a hands-on demo with the C70 in store. Once we have a demo unit, you would be able to come in and check it out yourself for sure. And right now, unless Peter's able to travel to up to see us, which I might guess he'd be ready to do, but might not be able to do yet.
I would love
Unfortunately,
to. However,
yeah,
we're
not traveling right now. So we can't have Peter come visit us yet, but we will hopefully as soon as we can. But once we have a demo in store, you can definitely come in and check it out in person. So we are open 7 days a week, with the exception of some holidays. We have staff. We're asking people to wear masks, and our goals are to be here for you, but also to have everybody be safe and healthy. So with that said, I want to thank you guys again, Peter and Stephanie, for this lovely first look at the C70. And again, for everyone else who's tuning in,
Yeah.
check out.
Thank you for
Go
having
ahead.
us. I really appreciate it. I love
Sorry, I just keep
doing these with
talking.
y'all.
You nailed
Well,
it.
yeah, you totally nailed it. Like I said, I always pick up something when you do your presentations. I always learn something new. And you just do a really good job of explaining things. So I appreciate that.
Shucks, you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, you're awesome. We love you. Everybody else, go to glazerscamera.com/anniversary. See what else is coming up. We have 3 more weeks of programming. This does not stop. We are going full on into mid-October. So thank you all. Have a great Friday afternoon, and we will see you live tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Thanks, everybody.